Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar Wednesday. We welcome you to use the chat to get to know one another and let us know your name, agency, and where you're joining us from today. We can go to the next slide. So today's webinar, we will have Spanish interpretation available. So to enable the interpretation, you can click the globe at the bottom of your screen and select your language. Next slide. Again, thank you all for joining us today for our webinar Wednesday. Today's presentation is on community action, well-being, sabbaticals, and rest justice. My name is Karis Manus. I'm a Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination here with the Community Action Partnership, and I'll be working behind the scenes today along with my colleague Denise Waits to help make sure everything goes smoothly for you all. A few notes as we get started. As I mentioned, interpretation is available. You can access that at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording today's webinar, and both the recording and the slides will be made available following the presentation today. Today's webinar will be interactive, so you'll have the opportunity to mute and unmute yourself as needed to interact with the presenter and others on the webinar. We do ask that you keep your microphone muted while the presenter is speaking, and if you have any questions or comments, please submit those through the chat. Next slide. So we want to begin with our land acknowledgement. We know that every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. We'll share a link in the chat for you to let us know where you're joining us from today. For me, I'm joining you all from North Carolina. So for me, this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Lumbee people, and I pay my respect to the elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land throughout all generations. We welcome you to share your acknowledgement in the chat as well. We also want to begin by grounding ourselves in the promise of community action. So you can repeat this with me where you are today. The community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And quickly introduce you to our practice transformation team here at the Community Action Partnership. We have Tiffany Marley, our Senior Vice President of Practice Transformation, Lily Seals, Director of Practice Transformation, Jennifer Gregory, Director of Mobility, Learning, Design, and Practice, Taylor Daniel, Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination, Tamaritas Hollywood, Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination, and then, as I mentioned, my name is Karis Manus. I'm also a Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination. Today, I have the honor of introducing you all to our speaker, Maria Elena de la Garza. Maria Elena brings over 30 years of nonprofit experience to her work as the Executive Director of the Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County in Watsonville, California. She stands on the values of equity, humility, and service to lead the agency in expanding services, strengthening community engagement, becoming more culturally reflective, and experiencing fiscal growth. As a public speaker on local, statewide, and national platforms, she strives to amplify the voices of immigrants, Latinx families, and those impacted by poverty. Today, Maria Elena will be sharing with us about the important topic of wellness and rest as an equity issue. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Maria Elena to get us started with today's presentation. Thank you all so much for being here.
Good morning, buenos dias on the Central Coast. It's still morning on this side of the world. I am so honored and grateful to have been invited to share this opportunity to share about this topic, which is so incredibly important and doesn't get enough time, energy, and attention. We don't talk about it enough. We don't think about it enough. We don't create the space for ourselves enough to have this conversation. And so I want to thank the 40 of you on this call for joining me today. I want to ask you respectfully to turn on your cameras. I know you're busy. I know that we have 1,000 emails in our inbox, but this is an interactive conversation. This isn't going to be your typical webinar. We're going to have some breakouts. We're going to have some conversations. And I need to see your beautiful faces to help me get through this conversation, because as you know, Zoom is hard. There you are, is it Magdi? I see you, and I see Sue and Trisha and Anna and Jamie and Karis. Thank you for turning on your cameras. It's so important for us to connect. Hi, Hadiza, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us to see your faces. It's so important for us to connect in real ways. I see you, Denise. Thank you for being here. Shirley, thank you for turning on your camera. Peter, welcome. It's so good to see your face. Thank you for being here. So today is about conversation around rest justice. And I will tell you, hi, Sonia, thank you for turning on your camera. I will tell you that even now, after I've been talking about it for over a year, people still smirk about it a little bit, or there's a little bit of uncomfortable feeling about having and taking the space to talk about this. And so I want to just share with you how I'm showing up today. I'm showing up today with gratitude. I'm showing up today after having a crazy 3 months of the year. Where we are on the Central Coast, we've been impacted by flooding since December 31st. It has been nonstop, and most recently we got impacted by the breach of the Pajaro River in North Monterey County, where thousands of people have been displaced. And so we have been in crisis mode and crisis response since December 31st. And early on in the floods, our team was ready and able, and our clients and our parent volunteers were so significant in crisis response to the tune of creating 80,000 sandbags. It was our community action volunteers and families that were helping create those sandbags. And most recently, with the breach of the Pajaro River, we've gotten a lot of press around the work that's been happening and those impacted, who were mostly agricultural, indigenous language speaking families who have nothing. And so you can imagine our role as community action and your role as community action is always to step in and to help those who are most vulnerable. So I show up today a little tired, but in a lot of gratitude to have you here with me to have this conversation. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask you all to take 3 deep breaths with me. And I'm going to count to 3, and we're going to take deep in breaths in through our nose and then external out through our mouth. So let's do that. If you would please honor me with your participation in this very easy exercise. Let's try. 1, 2, 3, and take a breath in, and then let it out. In. And in. Thank you with that. I am not a yoga person. I am not a practitioner of mindfulness every day. I just know that sometimes I forget to breathe. And so, like I sometimes forget to go to the bathroom, like I sometimes forget to drink water, like I sometimes forget to get up out of my chair and move. And so I invite you, if you feel the urge, to get up and shake it in your body, to move as we go through this conversation, to allow yourself to go pee if you got to allow yourself some water. I am encouraging you to be intentional about what your body is telling you as we have this conversation, because if you are like me, we do not hear the cues sometimes. Can you please raise your give me a thumbs up, raise your hand, give me an icon if you understand what I'm talking about. If this at all resonates in what I'm saying. Yeah, we know. You know, I know, you know. And so the objectives for today is I'm going to share about our journey, CAB's journey, my agency's journey. Is it perfect? No. Are we masters? No. Is it an everyday intention? Yes. I want us to understand the impact of stress in our bodies. And we're going to see a very short video. You know this stuff, but today is about reminding you, reminding us collectively, community action. We're going to talk about this wonderful term that is being coined right now called rest justice. And I want to share a little bit about that and point you to some more information about that. I want to share about the incredible opportunity that was created for me that last year, where I got 90 days off. Imagine 90 days off. And we're going to share tools. We're going to tell you how we did it. We're going to give you everything you need to plan it for yourselves and those on your team. We're going to talk about how much it costs and give you practical tools. And we're going to allow some dreaming time in this conversation. Next slide, please. And so we're going to do a raise your thumb, raise your hand, stand up and shake if any of this information resonates with you. So let me know if you have been in nonprofit leadership over 10 years. Let me know. Over 10 years. Have you been in nonprofit over 10 years? Yeah, I see you. I see you. Thank you. Raise your hand if sometimes, or raise a thumb, or raise a body, sometimes you have a hard time sleeping because you're replaying a work situation in your mind. I hear you, I feel you. Raise your hand or raise your thumb or raise your body if you happen to work over 40 hours a week on a consistent basis. Yep, I see you. I see you. Raise your hand if sometimes you feel tightness in your tummy when a challenging work situation comes to you. I see you. I see you. Tell me if you've ever experienced what is called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue. Yeah. Yeah, I see you, Natalie. Tell me if you are a person of color, Black, Latino, Asian, a person of color, however you identify, and have found yourself in equity conversations representing. People look to you to represent what a person of color feels on a certain issue. I see you, Sonia. I see you, Natalie. Raise your hands, your thumbs, your bodies if you have put off health-focused appointments for yourself due to work commitments. Look at how many hands are being raised right now. This one's a huge one. It's a huge one. Raise your hand or body or thumb if you have ever missed family or life events due to work commitments. Yeah, we know this one. Raise your hand if you wear more than one hat at your agency. You might be the ED or administrative assistant. You also might be the fundraiser. You might be the board mentor, the grant writer, the janitor. You might be the special events coordinator. You might be the letter signer. You might be the outreach person. You might be the network person. Look at all those hands raised. Yeah. And last bullet, raise your hand if you understand this statement. When you get time to rest, you're actually too tired to do anything that brings you joy. Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone take a deep breath with me? Because those are some real truths. Those were some real truths, my friends. Those situations are just the tip of the iceberg, just the tip of the iceberg of what we deal with in our roles and why these conversations are so important. We're going to go to the next slide, which shows a little bit of it's a short video about something I know all of us have heard of: fight, flight, and freeze. So if someone can roll that for me.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help us survive. Our fight, flight, or freeze survival response, the FFF for short, is designed to mobilize our brain and body to fight an enemy, run from an avalanche, or freeze to hide from a predator. Our brain sometimes misinterprets safe situations as dangerous and can set off false alarms. When the amygdala, our brain's watchdog, senses and barks danger, our body enters survival mode quicker than our rational mind can react, leaving it trying to figure out why we feel in mortal danger. When the FFF alarm is sounded, we start to breathe more quickly and shallow, causing hyperventilation, and our heart starts beating very fast. These changes can cause strong chest pain, which many people interpret as symptoms of a heart attack, when in fact it's just a result of the FFF activation, which can be relieved through breathing exercises. As a way of getting you ready for action, blood is diverted towards the major muscle groups. Blood flows away from our digestive system, causing the bladder to relax, and we might feel the need to pee. The mouth goes dry, nausea can occur, and we get the butterflies feeling in our stomach. Blood also rushes from extremities, leaving us with cold hands, but often sweaty palms as the action-ready body starts sweating to avoid overheating. Legs and hands can start trembling and feel weak, while tension starts building in big muscles like the thighs, neck, and shoulders. In our head, FFF alarms cause our brain to focus on negative memories, probably so it can scan them to avoid danger and negative outcomes. We get tunnel vision as our pupils dilate to increase our focus and long vision, but as a result, we lose our peripheral vision. FFF activation also reduces our ability to recognize differences in facial expressions. Too much oxygen and too little CO2 can result in dizziness or lightheadedness, which many people interpret as signs that they might faint. But because fainting is caused by a drastic drop in blood pressure, and because the FFF increases both our heart rate and blood pressure, it's nearly impossible to faint when this happens. Over time, depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress all harm the brain's ability to slow or cancel false FFF activations, causing them to happen more often. Knowing the symptoms of false activations makes it easier to recognize and reduce their effects. At Tanky Boxing, you can learn both bottom-up and top-down techniques to reduce false FFF activation and bring your body back to balance.
Thank you for that. By a show of thumbs, hands, or bodies, did you relate to what that video is about? You recognize that. I know you did. And I know what that means in our bodies. Thank you. And feel free to do thumbs in the chat too, because I'm watching those on the side over here. Can we get to the next slide, please? And so I want to tell you about how FFF showed up in my body, where I knew it was red flags for me. Imagine, can we get the next slide, please?
Humans, like all species, have...
Next one. There we go. So once upon a time, there was an ED, okay? I'm not naming any names, but you might recognize her. I will tell you that, imagine a year ago, right? We were still in the thick of COVID response. In my areas, not only had we had COVID response, we were in the thick of fire. We had fires in the state of California. And what started showing up for me that I could clearly articulate, I ran out of rabbits to pull out of my hat. Do you know what I mean? When a situation comes to you and you cannot I couldn't for the life of me have any clear way to respond or react to that. I ran out of rabbits. I ran out of solutions. My husband would tell you that I would come home and I had harsh tone. I was a harsh person. That's not me naturally. Yeah, sometimes, right? But not all the time. And he reminded me of how harsh I was sounding, and not just at home. It was happening at work too. There was this sense of urgency where everything that would come to my desk was elevated to a sense of urgency. And so the creation of this grind culture, move through it, what was the norm. And because I am who I am, my body reacts to stress in weight gain and health issues. I gained 30 to 35 pounds during the COVID stuff, right? I wasn't going to the things that were important to me, like aqua Zumba and walks with my peers. And my health numbers began to get out of control. And quite frankly, my sizzle had fizzled, and I was fantasizing about my next job. And you know what that was? And some of you may know this, and some of you may know I have no idea what I'm talking about. But back in the day, there used to be a store called Hollywood Video, and you'd go check out videos, right? This was before streaming. This was, you'd go get videos from the VHSs. Back in the day, it used to be these big old discs that you would, like big old albums, and you'd put them into the machine. So Hollywood Video would have videos of movies. So my fantasy, which was constant in my head, was that I would go back and be a Hollywood Video customer service person, where I would be happily taking care of people and giving them their favorite videos and wishing them a great evening with popcorn and candy. That was my fantasy. And those began to be triggers for me. Look at Jacqueline, you have a fantasy. I see it in your face. I can see it. You guys that know what I'm talking about. You have a fantasy of, I could do this, or what if I did this? I could see it. And I could tell, for me, it was a red flag, because I was thinking of exit strategies to this work that I love and that I adore and that I was born to do. I was looking for exit strategies. And so in March of 2 years ago was my ED evaluation, and I sat with my personnel committee and we went through my evaluation, and everything was they gave me good feedback. There were no red flags or concerns. And I had the nerve. I was afraid to bring it up because, sabbaticals and nonprofits is not something that is common. But I thought I'd bring it up to my personnel committee, and I said, team, would you consider? I need a break. I know I need a break. I'm not okay. And I want to stay at CAB. I love this agency. Would you consider exploring a sabbatical for me? And they didn't think about it twice. They said, Maria Elena, if you find the money, do it. And so, of course, the next task was finding the money. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I was given the green light. And I began to talk about it with my team and with my board and with my community partners, so that there was a raised awareness that there was a focus on the need for me to have a break, and that there wasn't shame around it, because I was embarrassed. I had some shame. Me daba vergüenza. Me daba pena. I was embarrassed about it. But I loved myself and my job and this agency enough to know that I had to do something and have the courage to ask. I had the courage to ask. And so on the next slide, I'm going to start talking about how this fits under rest justice. Rest justice is a new term, and I learned about it through a nonprofit quarterly review, and you can Google it, nonprofit quarterly review. And it's a wonderful article that talks about the importance of rest and how people, women and people of color, how it's different. It's different for us in how we stand in this world and in this work. And so what is rest justice? And so rest is not just about the ability to get a good night's sleep, but that is a part of it. It is also the ability to not constantly worry, to have a sustained peace of mind, to have stability, for example, stability of a good job, family and children are safe, no threat of losing your home. For nonprofits, it's about stable budgeting. It's about stable programming. It's about no surprises, no unexpected risk. It's about being gentle with ourselves when we make a mistake or we do something wrong. It's about triggers from my trauma response. So all those things that impact what my rest, what my peace, what my Zen might be. And race inequality, and notice there's a mistake there, but that's okay. You know what I'm talking about. I'm forgiving myself for a mistake on my slide, a national webinar, and there's a mistake on my slide. It's all good. You know what I mean. Rest inequality is the gap in the quality, duration, and amount of rest people get depending on their status in Western culture. Income levels, housing conditions, employment status, type of work, race, immigration status, being a mom. Mandy, I see you. Being a mom, raising children, being a partner, being a wife, being a partner, being a husband. Those things impact rest equality. And those words, that article gave me words about that to describe something that I didn't know how to describe in my life. My mother was an immigrant from Mexico. My father was a Texan, and they worked 365 days of their lives. They never took a day off. And they had a family business. It was a restaurant, but I never saw my parents take a day off, ever. My dad died when I was 7, 8 years old. My mom was a widow who didn't speak English and raised 2 little girls by herself and running a business without speaking English and without knowing how to drive. She never took a day off. Imagine. And I honor them because their work allowed me to have a job that gives me weekends off most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, that I get home at a decent hour and try to make dinner for my family or cuddle my dog. Imagine never seeing your parents taking time off. And so for me, rest wasn't part of the equation. Rest was not, I did not allow myself that. And that was so deeply ingrained in who I am as a person, right? That it impacted, to the degree it impacted my health. That didn't mean listen, I'm a 9-hour girl. Let me tell you, in the last 3 years, I have discovered that for my body, I need 9 hours of sleep. 9 hours. And I know some of you work on 4 hours. Do we have any 4-hour people here? Raise your hand, give me a thumbs up, let me see. Do we have a 6-hour people here? Raise your hand, let me see if you're a 6-hour. Yeah. Do we have any 8-hour people here? Yeah. Any niners with me? Yes. Yes. It took me over about 50, how old am I? It took me till I was 56 to discover I was a 9-hour girl and to not be ashamed to say it. Next slide, please. So rest, justice. Rest is an act of freedom because we're fighting against these narratives. The narratives of my mother and father never having a day off. The narratives of rest is weakness, or it's luxury, or it's leisure. The narratives against pick yourself up by your bootstraps. It's grind culture. If you want to be successful, you got to keep hitting it. Go, 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 go. The narratives against we're lazy, Black people, Latinos, fat people, people of color, women, we're lazy. We see it in the media. We see it everywhere. Those narratives are real. The Latino with the big sombrero hat sleeping by the cactus. My parents were lazy. They never had a day off to sleep by that damn cactus. You know what I'm talking about. That rest should be earned. And this article talks about going back to slavery and how that impacted how people of color, Black people, how Latinos, immigrants, how we hold rest in our bodies and in our stance in the world. And those narratives create the grind culture, the grind culture. Next slide, please. I see you, Karis, thank you. Next slide, please. And so when I saw this quote, it burned a fire in me. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. That is an act of revolution. Because everything around us tells us everything different. Next slide, please. We're going to do breakouts, quick breakouts. These are the questions that we want you to tackle in your breakouts. What are some narratives you hold about rest for yourselves? What are some narratives you hold about rest for others? How does the grind culture exist at your place of work? How is rest and leisure promoted in your place of work and with yourselves? We're going to break out. I'm going to ask you, do not put me in a breakout, but everyone else will break out. If there are we're going to keep Spanish interpretation and folks in the Spanish space in this room, I think. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that that you had some time for some discussion, and I want to just hear back from a few of you. So I'm gonna just call on you, and you can pass, but I'm just gonna call on a couple of you. How about Nicole Popejoy? Tell any ahas in that conversation.
We had a slow start because we didn't see the questions in our chat once we moved out of the main session, but Sherry got those for us, and a couple of us were able to share. I'm one of 9 kids. My mom stayed home and my dad worked very hard. So my experience growing up was seeing how hard both of them kind of worked in their ways to make sure that we have what we needed. But then as I started working, I ended up in nonprofits that cared about their communities and the families they served, but not about their staff. So I had a very rough experience, I guess, and missing a lot of what I felt was important, and left there to go to another nonprofit that has been wonderful.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to call one more person. Sonia, do you want to share? Pinkney, unmute.
Yes, absolutely. So the ladies that I was talking to, we all talked about, you know, how sometimes you like you feel that you have to earn it, like you have to deserve a chance to get some rest. And, you know, we talked about how, you know, sometimes we don't take care of ourselves, and that's really not good. You know, we talked about how these jobs will be here when we're gone. Someone will, you know, replace us in 30 seconds. It'll be posted, and, you know, someone will be typing away, you know, doing what we did. So these jobs can survive without us, and we have to learn how to love on ourselves, like, honestly.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I am the ED of this agency, and this agency thrived while I was gone for 90 days. It did not fall. It did not lose funding. It did not shut down. It frickin' thrived. Okay. Thank you for those comments. Next slide, please. So here, okay, I'm going to go really quick because we're going to be losing. We're short on time, and there's hundreds of slides here. But I'm just going to push through and to give you the gist. You need to start with an agency-wide wellness strategy. How many of you have an agency-wide wellness strategy? Kathy, I saw one hand go up. Good job, Kathy. Good job. We need to incorporate, oh, and I see Kesha. Good job. We need to incorporate a wellness strategy as part of our strategic plan. That is the thing that we did as CAB. We created a full objective for agency wellness and a plan, right? That needed, it wasn't just about, oh, Maria Elena's going to go on a sabbatical. Yay. No, that wasn't the sole strategy. It was about understanding that we needed to create more bench. We needed to create administrative positions to help in the infrastructure of the agency. CAB was wonderful at funding services and frontline positions, but ignored the administrative infrastructure that it needed to run the agency. And so we needed to invest in a couple of positions. At one point, I was overseeing 5 out of the 6 program departments, along with doing everything, all the other parts of it being an ED. And so I knew that wasn't sustainable. So we created a director of programs and impact position, and we created some bench under our CFO. When I got to the agency, there was 3 of us in agency administration and about a whole bunch of frontline staff. So we needed to balance that out a little bit. We needed to have succession planning as part of wellness. It's about succession planning. So that was part of our strategy for the executive key positions. We also included we developed a self-care series for CAB leadership for directors and admin and ED. We started with the inner core. The inner core got investment of time, energy, and money to help support our wellness. And then we extended the different ripples to the agency, but we were working with primarily the directors and administration. So that was part of our wellness strategy. And that gave me the tool to then go and look for funding. Next slide, please. So the Do Free Foundation, and you'll see the link at the end of this PowerPoint, there's best practices for sabbaticals, for ED, or for any key positions at your agency, and why they're important to rejuvenate leaders, to increase organizational capacity, strengthen the second tier of leadership, enhance succession planning, and strengthening governance. And so there's best practices. There's research that shows why sabbaticals are healthy and important. Next slide, please. Best practices include 3-month absence with no contact. No contact. I can tell you I was probably contacted 5 times, if that, in my 3 months away. I was contacted by some elected officials. I created the boundary. I'm sorry, Zach Friend, Board of Supervisors. I cannot go be a public speaker for this. I'm on sabbatical, but you can talk to Helen. And he understood and respected once the boundary was set. Internal staff leads in the absence of the leader. You don't bring in professional interim executive directors. You grow from within. We did bring in some support. And you'll see a little bit more about that. And we also infused professional development. We had a mindfulness coach that met with our directors weekly. We had a professional executive coach that helped support some of the sabbatical squad folks. And there was ongoing structural, semi-structured, but regular peer group for sabbatical alumni. So that's part of the Do Free Foundation that brings sabbatical people to have conversations about that. Next slide, please. So we're going to skip that we're going to skip it to ED vision for sabbatical. So this is my internal vision for the sabbatical. I wanted professionally to free up my head and allow the rabbits to be born again. I needed some ideas, and I wanted to connect with other community action agencies in my leisure. I wanted to be practical. I wanted to catch up on personal work. I needed health appointments, doctor's appointments. I needed to meet with my financial advisor. I'm 58. I hadn't met with my financial advisor. And for God's sakes, I needed to declutter my house. Personal, I needed time with my hubby, with my friends, with my family. I needed to feel healthier. And spiritual, I needed to understand and feel what joy was. I needed to practice the art of spontaneity. Imagine, you know what I mean. My life was planned to the minute daily, and I needed to practice stillness. What did it feel like to not do anything? God, that was the hardest one. That, my friends, was the hardest one. Next slide, please. So really quickly, we're going to do a popcorn. If we can unmute. What would you do if you were given 90 days off? Shirley, what would you do? Shirley Paulson, what would you do with 90 days off? Unmute, Shirley. And I'm going to ask Anna Cardarella next.
I think I would just have to do some traveling
Uh-huh.
to places that I've always wanted to go to, but there was never time to do that.
Amen. I hear you,
Yeah.
Shirley. I hear you. Thank you. Anna, what would you do? And then I'm going to ask Peter.
I would travel. I have a son going off to college across the country, and I would go visit him and explore.
Amen. Peter, what would you do? And Belva, I'm going to ask you next.
Well, I'd spend a fair amount of time traveling too. I did spend some time in Indonesia about 30 years ago. I'd love to get back and connect with some of that. And then I also live on a little farm that I would want to get to know better.
I love that.
So just stick here and dig deeply into this spot.
I love that. Belva, do you want to unmute? What would you do? And then Samantha, if you're with us, I'd love to hear from you.
So I would rest, get some rest. I would even spend time with my sisters and family during that time.
Absolutely. Samantha, are you with us? You may or may not be with us. That's okay. Karis, what would you do with 90 days off?
I have to go with traveling too. I would spend some time traveling as well.
Yep. Tamaridis, what would you do with 90 days off?
I'd be a full-time mom.
Woo! Woo! Yes. Hannah, what would you do with 90 days off?
I would rediscover what it means to be a body instead of a brain, and I would go take some dance classes and yoga classes. And visit family.
I love that. Leah, I see your comment. Absolutely nothing. Harder said than done. I will tell you that. Harder said than done. I'm going to invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to daydream about what you would do for 90 days. Next slide, please. Okay, how much it costs? I'm going to get really quickly into logistics. It costs about $33,000 a month. We were funded by the Packard Foundation. They allowed an organizational grant to help support the sabbatical and mindfulness activities. We redirected program sources that would pay for me to help with the sabbatical squad team. And then the Packard Foundation said, we're only going to do this if you have skin in the game, Cab. And the board allowed for about 10% of general reserve funding for this project. So that's how we paid for it, and that's how much it cost. Next slide, please. We paid on the sabbatical squad compensation. There are key elements, key people that helped with the planning that took us about a year to do, and they got paid for it. And when we asked them, were they compensated enough? They said yes. They paid for ED salary. I got paid while I was gone. It paid for extra help. We had a 30-hour administrative manager position to help support the administrative team, and it paid for professional coaching and ongoing mindfulness support. Next slide, please. The sabbatical squad made up of acting ED, director of program and impact, CFO, administrative coordinator and assistant to the ED, director of special programs, director of employment programs, and administrative support manager. These are the positions that got compensated, and they led this agency to thrive during my time away. Next slide, please. The next few slides is the planning timeline. And so I want, if you think, I'm not going to go into the details of this because we're short on time, but it is your step-by-step, what you need to plan. Can you process all the steps here so that everyone can see them as I'm speaking? Thank you. It gives you step-by-step of how to do it, how to ask, how to talk to your sabbatical, to your personnel committee, to your board chairs, how to get funding, how we advocated. So not only did I advocate for CAB by talking to the funders, we also advocated to the nonprofit folks from California, which was 118 partners, funders of 118 agencies. And we talked about the importance of mindfulness and self-care and sabbaticals and allowing funding for that because it's not easily funding. Our agency budget back then was about 7 million, más o menos. 7 million, más o menos. We saw a spike with COVID that brought us to about 12 million, which was the COVID spike. And then now we're down to about 8 million, 9 million. And we followed up with foundations. We followed up with one-on-one conversations with the foundations. Next slides, please. You'll see this is a planning timeline, 1 year to 6 months, all the way down to the next slide, which is the 1 month before and the sabbatical launch date. Folks, I was dancing. We did it. We planned. And in your toolkit will be a planning matrix, not rocket science, but a guide for you of how we planned and what were the things, everything that we thought of, for example, like launching the sabbatical squad, of course. Informal interviews. I interviewed EDs who had gone on sabbaticals to get information. Then as I got closer, I met with each of my board members. I met with my executive committee of the board. I met individually with each one of my directors. I wanted them to help me identify blind spots. What are we missing? What do we need to do? And we also intentionally identified urgent, routine, and suspend areas. Some things were going to be urgent, some things were status quo, and some things were going to be held off because they weren't important enough. Next slide, please. Things you want to consider: timing, funding cycles, advocacy timing. You know how when we go and fight for money, the CAP plan process. Remember, last year was not CAP plan year. Agency fiscal stability. If you are not stable, if you do not have a little bit of stability on your ground level, it's not time for you yet. It's not time for you yet. The availability of extra help. If I wouldn't have been able to call the extra help person who happened to be the retired CAB a COO of 25 years who said, yes, I'll do it. And he's been retired for 12 years now, and he came in to help support the team. And the stability of the board, really important. Next slide. So we had conversations around what were some of the learnings around the sabbatical. Next slide, please. And this was the learnings from some of the learnings from the team. It helped us to recommit to our mission-focused assessment of projects. It helped build the strength of the team, sharing unique talents. The community connections matter on all levels of the agency, because I'll tell you, the community network around CAB, we're all making sure that CAB was taken care of and that sabbatical team was supported. I would get notes on Facebook saying, your team is doing great. So that stuff was really, really important. And that CAB has a strong community foundation, that our sabbatical did not threaten our positions. Next slide, please. I want to highlight the learnings from the squad. This is what they want you to know that they learned. They understood my role. They understood that that it was important to keep people in the right lane. But the most beautiful analogy was when the moon is away, the stars shine more brightly. When the moon is away, the stars shine more brightly. And we practice more intentional sharing of responsibilities and decision-making. And next slide, please. What I learned and reinforced how much I value the CAB team. I practiced spontaneity. I practiced stillness. And again, that's the one that was most difficult to me. I understood that a pace change was needed, that I needed to set boundaries for myself, and that there was a ripple of influence. I did social media posts about my sabbatical and my learnings, and people would respond and then tell me, Marilena, because you did that, I took 2 weeks off in the summer to spend time with my nephew. Because you did that, it reminded me that I needed to do that. So it was a larger ripple effect. Next slide, please. And the next, we'll go to new practices, more to come really quickly. If we can go to the next slide. What has been incorporated, next slide, please, in the learnings is I took my work email off my cell phone. That has made a tremendous difference. It's been, I'm not going to lie, it's been back on through crisis response, but I'm more mindful about my time on my phone. I scheduled before crisis response, I was taking 2 extra days off of PTO a month. Crisis response happens, I need to get back to it. Hold and respect health practices. I go to the pool, I'm an aqua Zumba. I've asked my peers, and I ask you to help me keep accountable to myself. Remind me, ask me, text me, email me. Are you going to the pool, Maria Elena? Protocols on max number of daily meetings, we're still working on that. Accountability peers for self-care, ask, nudge, and notice. Hannah, have you gone to your yoga class lately? Helen, can you go home at 7 o'clock today instead of 8:30? We have to help each other because self-care works, but community care works more. Next slide, please. No, in this slide are all these toolkits for you, all the things that you need to help you make it happen. And we're going to share this slide with you. And lastly, closing thoughts on axes and dahlias. Why axe throwing was an issue and was important for me and growing dahlias, because I'd never gone axe throwing, and that was part of me being spontaneity. And as you can see, I hit the bullseye. Not easy to do, but go have fun and try it if you've never done it. And I grew dahlias. My late friend Gloria Nieto, who was a freaking awesome community activist and executive director, passed away during my sabbatical, right after my sabbatical, but she gave me dahlias to plant, and that was my first bloom. And one of the things that she said to me is executive directing will get you, and will hurt you if you do not put guardrails to take care of yourselves and the people around you. And so what I did, I traveled like many of you. I spent time with family. I did connect to some community action agencies in leisure. I attended a silent retreat with some local monks. I went to Aqua Zumba. I rest, I napped. I discovered I needed 9 hours, and I practiced joy and leisure. And so I want to encourage you. If nothing else resonates, if nothing else you remember, I want to say to you, you are absolutely deserving of rest. You are absolutely entitled to create boundaries around yourself to rest. And it's not just about self-care, it's about community care. We're good about taking care, community action, about flood victims and fire victims and people who need food. We need to take care of ourselves and our staff, and we need to do it intentionally by incorporating mindfulness. I'm going to stop there. I know there wasn't enough time, but I want to thank you for your willingness to engage with me in this conversation. And Hannah, can you put my email on the chat here? I invite you to send me an email to tell me about how this lands for you and tell me about how you will be different because of this conversation. Karis, I send it over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria Elena. That's such a powerful presentation, and those closing words, we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of our staff, and we need to do it intentionally. So we appreciate you sharing today, and thank you all so much for being here. In closing, we're just going to share a few more resources with you, and as Maria Elena mentioned, all of these will be provided in our follow-up email to you. So all of the links and the resources that have been shared, you will have access to those in the follow-up as well. Next slide. So first, we want to be able to hear from you. We'll share a link in the chat for an evaluation survey of today's presentation. We want to hear from you as we're planning these sessions moving forward. What is it that you all need and what's helpful for you all? So we'll share the link for you there and welcome your feedback for today's presentation. Next slide. We also have some resources on building resiliency using trauma-informed approaches. Dr. Denise Shervington presented several webinars with us on becoming a healing organization, and there's some great resources that go right along with the same topic we want to share with you all as well. So we'll be providing that information to you in the chat and in the follow-up as well. Of course, we have our webinar Wednesday schedule. So any upcoming webinars that we have, we want you to look and see what's available and sign up for what it is that you need and is beneficial for you. We've got several great sessions coming up soon. Also, we have our Community Action Academy. So this is our free online learning hub for the Community Action Network, which is powered by Moodle. We've got several free e-courses that are available on family-centered coaching, advancing racial equity, organizational standards, collective impact, and many more. So we definitely encourage you, if you're not already on the Community Action Academy, that you set up an account and see what's available there. We also have Fresh Finds. This is available on our website. This is the latest anti-poverty resources. So we try to share any upcoming webinars or funding opportunities from other organizations that are engaging in anti-poverty efforts. So we keep that updated periodically and encourage you to check that out and see what's available. We also have coming up June 6th through 8th, our Whole Family Approach Institute will be in Washington, D.C., and we'll be sharing more details about that soon. We definitely encourage you to attend that if you're available. And we have our contact information here at the partnership as well. So any questions or follow-up that you have regarding today's presentation, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Once again, thank you all so much for being here today. We appreciate you all, and we hope that you're leaving encouraged and empowered and ready to continue in this work. We thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Be well. Be well. Thank you. You deserve to breathe and to go pee and to drink water, and you deserve some time. Thank you so much for being here.